Man and the Moon was the second Tomorrowland show to probe the future of space exploration. And again, it is introduced not only by Walt Disney, but by the show's producer, director, and co-writer, Ward Kimball. Like its predecessor, this show begins by tracing man's fascination with the moon, from the first superstitions and legends through Galileo's invention of the telescope and the questions surrounding that compelling light show known as an eclipse. It also shows us how prominently the moon figures in our culture, from the works of William Shakespeare to the words of popular nursery rhymes. There's even a parody of an old Tin Pan Alley popular song called Ah, See the Moon. This whole segment of the show is brimming with visual puns and whimsical sight gags so typical of Kimball and his collaborators, including John Dunn, who a decade later provided visual gags for the Pink Panther cartoons. The graphic design in this part of the show is bold, modern, and witty, a far cry from what people think of as typical Disney. But the real star of this program is Wernher von Braun, the brilliant and forward-thinking scientist who lays out for us step by step what will occur as man approaches the task of flying to the moon. Using models, simulations, and a dramatic enactment with actors, sets, and props, we see a 1955 projection of what manned spaceflight will look and feel like, including the incredible notion of weightlessness. We even see how tomorrow's astronauts will deal with an emergency in space, using robotic arms to patch a dangerous leak in one of their vessels. This was science fiction made real through the extraordinary efforts of Walt Disney and his team. It made its debut on the Disneyland TV show on December 28, 1955, and was rerun 4 years later under the title Tomorrow the Moon.
Walt Disney's Disneyland.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are.
Each week as you enter this timeless land, one of these many worlds will open to you. Frontierland. Tall tales and true from the legendary past. Tomorrowland. Promise of things to come. Adventureland, the wonder world of nature's own realm. Fantasyland, the happiest kingdom of them all. Presenting this week,
at Disneyland Park, the realm devoted to things of the future is called Tomorrowland. One of the popular attractions here is our simulated rocket trip around the moon. After entering the Disneyland spaceport, visitors may experience the thrills that space travelers of the future will encounter when rocket trips to the moon become a daily routine. However, scientists tell us that it will be many years before space travel becomes a reality. After consulting with the scientists, our artists and studio technicians have prepared a factual picture of how the coming conquest of the moon will be accomplished. Here to tell you about it is director Ward Kimball.
When we hear the exciting news of how the rocket scientists of today are preparing for tomorrow's trip to the moon, we must remember that such a trip has long been the dream of many men since history began. But before we consider the scientific plans for a trip to the moon, let us first show you, as sort of a prologue, the results of our research into the legends and facts and foibles, superstitions of man and the moon. Roll the moon sequence, please.
This is the moon. It shines over the great cities. It illuminates the countryside, and its reflection shimmers on lakes and oceans. This is the moon that saw life begin on Earth millions of years ago. As primeval man watched the moon in the night sky, it became to him an object of curiosity. In legend, he tells the story of an old man who, while digging, discovered a small shiny object. As he held it in his hands, it grew and grew, and finally escaped into the sky to become the moon. To primitive man, the moon was somewhat of a personality. Sometimes he saw in it the face of another man, or a woman. Some ancient aborigines thought they saw a four-eyed leopard. Perhaps the greatest mystery to our ancestors was the moon's strange ability to change its shape. The early Hindus believed that it was Chandrashka, the god of night, slowly turning his lamp as he moved across the sky. The Aegeans, on the other hand, thought the moon was a silver shield, reflecting the seas and mountains of the earth. Moon worship was an important part of many ancient religions. The Sumerians called the moon Nana, and the golden calf with crescent horns was a symbol of reverence. Here stands the Egyptian moon god Thoth, the reckoner of time. 12 times between the annual rise of the Nile, the moon grew to fullness. This gave Egypt one of the first lunar year calendars. And here is Diana, the Grecian moon goddess, whose beauty inspired the Romans to build a silver temple in her honor. To some primitive races, an eclipse was a mysterious and terrible thing to behold. They believed a giant serpent was devouring the sun's light, so they danced and made great noises to frighten the moon beast away. And he would go away. The first book devoted completely to the moon was a parchment by Plutarch. He said the moon was simply a smaller Earth, but unlike the Earth, its inhabitants were demons. These words of Plutarch inspired one Lucian of Samosata to record what was perhaps the first science fiction story. He tells of a very strange journey to the moon in 160 A.D. A ship went sailing on western seas through the Pillars of Hercules. She sailed through a realm as dark as night, pursuing her course of lunar flight. The Moon King held his hand aloft and cried to far and near, "Begone, ye earthling creatures bold. There are no women here." There followed upon the face of the earth a period called the Dark Ages. For centuries, the light of knowledge was extinguished, and only a fleeting mention of the moon was made. Moon. Then there was the great event of 1609. Galileo Galilei built a telescope and made the first close-up observations of the moon. He excitedly announced that he had observed the moon as another world, complete with mountains and seas. When the astronomer-mathematician Johannes Kepler heard of Galileo's startling observations, he immediately set to work on a book about the moon called Somnium, or Sleep. In this very imaginative account, Kepler goes to sleep during an eclipse and is kidnapped by moon demons. Because they cannot bear the light of the sun, they migrate to and from the earth, using the moon's shadow for a bridge. Here on the moon, Kepler wakes to see a fur-covered moon creature emerging during the cool of the evening. Amazing. Kepler's experience inspired the English bishop Francis Godwin to write a book called The Man in the Moon. His hero is a Spanish gentleman exiled on St. Helena, who escapes by building a contraption that harnesses the efforts of large swan-like birds. He realizes too late that these birds are of a rare type that migrate all the way to the moon. However, the trip is interesting, and he finds that the moon's inhabitants vary in size according to their rank. Their only language is music. A few years later, the flamboyant Cyrano de Bergerac makes comments on the possibility of traveling to the moon. His close friends scoff at the idea. This drives Cyrano to prove his point by writing a unique science fiction moon trip. His own personal device for getting to the moon is a string of bottles containing dew. Anyone knows that as the sun rises, so does the morning dew, and so does Cyrano. His scheme works so well that he has to discard some of the dew bottles for fear of overshooting his mark. But alas, he drops one too many, misses the moon, and lands in Canada. The natives are very hostile. He has to escape. What to do? Build a rocket, of course. This time he is more successful. When his fuel supply gives out, the moon's gravity helps him make a triumphant lunar landing. In 1835, a sensational news report appeared in the New York Sun. Sir John Herschel, noted astronomer, had discovered life on the moon. The account stated that Sir John, aided by a powerful new telescope, was able to study the moon from a distance of 50 feet. He observed fantastic rock formations, strange plants, and hairy man-like creatures with bat wings who walked about in a dignified manner. There were animals, too, grazing bison and one-horned unigoats who were very playful. However, this whole story was the imaginative product of an overzealous reporter. It was a complete hoax, a moon hoax. Here we see the leading characters in Jules Verne's Victorian trip around the moon. 3 adventurers are given a fraternal send-off by the brothers of the Baltimore Gun Club. After a very hazardous trip, the daring spacemen are given a hearty reception by the brothers of the Baltimore Gun Club. Frequent reference to the moon is made in great literature. Shakespearean societies have long delighted in such lunar lyrics as Romeo, "Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon." Juliet, "Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb."